One could argue that Gotham City is the main character in any Batman story, more than the Caped Crusader himself. In Batman novels, Gotham City is the darkness that Batman is trying to rise above. The appeal is that this city could be anywhere in the US, and readers would still be able to relate to the grim and dirty underbelly that lies upon it. A self-serving society that grows and evolves as Batman's influence changes onto it. Over the years, we've seen many depictions of Gotham City, from Tim Burton's gothic German expressionism to the clean and grounded look of Nolan's Dark Knight trilogy. No matter which version of the story, the backdrop is an essential part of the narrative, and it's why I wanted to take a look today at my favourite version of Gotham on film, found in Matt Reeves' newest entry, The Batman. The Batman takes a different approach to how the city is portrayed, and to an extent how the whole film is shot and conveyed. Cinematographer Greg Fraser bounces off of his work from Dune and creates a shallow depth of field, already making this version of Gotham City a tightly restricted one throughout the film. This matches in tone with the rest of the story, unravelling Gotham's underbelly, and so, as the film goes on, we get pieces of Gotham to collectively build up geometry of the streets, the interiors, but never getting to pull back from the action to see the city unveiled. The mystery is retained throughout, as does the mysterious plot, until the very end. What we do see of Gotham utilises immersive world building and incredible set design. The city was built to have a history. A quote from production designer James Chinland goes as follows: "The idea was that in the 1920s and 30s there was this incredible boom, so we wanted this base layer of crumbling, decaying ornament. And at various points in Gotham's history, the idea was that there were these attempts at revival and renewal." Filmmakers were looking at crafting the Gothic roots that were present in both Tim Burton's 1989 film and also the animated series that followed in 1992, but using real-world locations that would take a page from Nolan's book, in making the world of the film grounded and relatable. England, Scotland, and America were used to craft this version of Gotham City, finding authentic locations that built upon the grandeur and authenticity needed to bring the city to life. Mainly looking at cathedrals and schools to provide a classic and vintage look to the architecture, like a city trapped in the past, desperately trying to edge forward. One of the most unappreciated elements of comic book movies is how the filmmakers must tackle putting a character so fantastical into a real-world environment. When it comes down to it, these are characters that do not belong in the real world, and so the way you can use the architecture of Gotham to similarly toe the line between a real city and that of a comic book helps to pull all the elements together and make Batman feel like a part of the world, and you never feel like his involvement is an unbelievable one. However, whilst practical locations were used, we cannot discredit the incredible work that was done digitally to bring this Gotham together. In 2020 it was announced that the Stagecraft technology used on The Mandalorian would make its big screen debut with the Batman, developed by ILM and utilising the Unreal game engine that had even been used in Batman's own Arkham video games. The volume was a way for the filmmakers to control as much of the scene as possible when shooting under restrictions, as shooting on top of skyscrapers would be a difficult task, whilst getting the skyline and lighting they wanted to show the dusk and dawn of Gotham. With the help of the volume, the warm glows on the actors' faces could be more authentic than that of a green screen, and the image could be frozen in place so they were not restricted by time and could shoot the sunset and sunrise for as long as possible. This makes it so the skyline of Gotham is unlike any city seen before, and its physical impact on the scene with the sun actually having light to reflect off the actors makes it feel that much more real. This included the additions of lens flares, fluorescent lights and silicon filters applied to the lens of the Alexa LF that created further lighting imperfections to sell the Stagecraft set as a real one and expose the imperfections in the city narratively. This did, however, create an issue, since any complementary CGI elements added in post would need to replicate the effects of the practical applications put onto the digital camera, which led to scenes like the Penguin car chase, in which the visual effects artists had to try and digitally recreate the imperfections that Fraser had applied to the lens to keep some level of consistency. When I looked at Greg adding those globs of silicon to the filters, I was slightly terrified, because now Weta was going to have to replicate it, and as we added virtual elements to match that crazy distortion, Anders' team got really excited about integrating the CG with the rest of the photography, as quoted from VFX supervisor Dan Lemon. The final result is a Gotham City that is dirty and rancid, feeling left behind from the rest of the world and baking in an orange glow of the city street lamps, which boosts the temperature of every scene, feeling hot and dangerous with tension. The film is a neo-noir tale, and so the high contrasting colours of orange and black seen throughout the film give off a noir mood and atmosphere. As discussed in my video on neon in film, what makes a film a noir visually is all about contrast, and the Batman chooses to have extreme lighting choices throughout, to paint the bold and bleak nature of the city, and it wants you to see it as a hazy nightmare. This high contrast was an intentional choice, as the movie was printed onto film and then put through a bleach bypass to intentionally bring out the higher contrasted image in the final look. It's also no coincidence that Carmine Falcone is primarily shown wearing orange sunglasses in every scene he appears in. This could foreshadow the major twist of the film, that Falcone has been secretly running Gotham City for decades in secret, using his connections. He sees through an orange filter, much like he wants the rest of the city to. He is an observer the same way the audience is, and you get the impression that he forces Gotham to see things his way. On a narrative level, Gotham City is in a state of neglect. Below a gleaming skyline, the low-life criminals pillage and vandalise. The streets are grimy and graffitied beyond recognition, in the shadowed underbelly of a disregarded subway system that slowly grinds across the city. Nearly every scene of the film features a thick layer of rain and fog. This creates a foreboding atmosphere and conveys a miserable tone for the unhappy citizens of Gotham. It can also represent the looming rebirth on the horizon, as Riddler would later flood the city to rid Gotham of its corruption, which is when the rain stops and Gotham finally sees a glimpse of daylight through the clouds as a new city is created. The commitment to the style of the city only adds to the narrative by giving the characters a backstory through the visuals. It can skip a lot of corners by simply showing that Gotham is an urban nightmare, and we can piece together as the audience that the characters have had to endure a lot of sleepless nights. This is a city on many layers, much how the new architecture is built on the remains of the old ones. Gotham's corrupt elite are similarly trying to build on top of a crumbling foundation and look after themselves, whilst Gotham City's residents never reap any of the benefits. It's in Gotham's characters that we see the personification of the city itself. The rich members of Gotham's elite are kept primarily in the past, with Falcone and Bruce being the only remaining memory of that time period passed down through the generations. Gotham is very much split down the middle, as we see the people without any power being scared and miserable, as Gotham is hardly ripe for opportunity, whereas people like Riddler and the new mayor show people rising up from the slums and having a voice to rally up the people and create real change. The mayor specifically is a bright light in the heart of Gotham that shows the only real potential for the city to rise above its burdened past inhabitants. However, Riddler is scorned by that past and doesn't believe any of the current citizens are worth saving. In a way, this creates the central conflict of the film. Even Bruce needs to understand the way the city works through his learning of the past. You believe in a sense that this world exists and has been thoroughly thought out in no disregard for how the comics handled it themselves. For decades now, writers have loved the story of the rich in Gotham, pulling the strings from behind the scenes, and in many ways, Gotham is puppeteered in a similar way here. Scott Snyder's run of the comic books also spent a large majority of its opening volumes looking at Gotham City as its focus. What is Gotham to the people living there? The ultimate conclusion in the book is that Gotham is Batman, and his character ultimately is the one in control of how Gotham succeeds or fails as a city, no matter who is in control behind the scenes. Because, as an extension of Gotham, Bruce fails in the movie to stop the Riddler, the city as a result becomes flooded due to Riddler's plan succeeding and washing away what we once knew. In previous Batman films, while the city may have changed in the people living there, we never saw much of a difference in how the city looked as a whole. Taking from the Arkham games, we now have a complete shake-up in how Gotham is presented. The city now being flooded gives a brand new environment to tackle, and yet another incarnation of Gotham to be built on top of. This continues the theme of renewal, and if the source material is to be believed, we may have an upcoming free-for-all, with all of Batman's rogues gallery occupying different surviving districts of Gotham, as seen in the comic No Man's Land, that led me to believe that the final form of Gotham's renewal won't be seen until perhaps a third movie. By showing the gradual growth and changes of the city, we believe that Batman is really making a difference, and can visually see the impact he's having around him. In this case, we have seen his failures, but who knows yet what his successes will do to transform Gotham. During the final sequence, we actually get to see Gotham in daylight for the first time, and the contrast is lowered significantly so we can see the orange glow of the sun is now on the back of our heroes far in the distance, to suggest that the influence of Falcone is now past them beyond reach. Overall, I find this Gotham City to be one of the most realised on screen, and a beautiful sight to behold. The way the filmmakers utilised all the tools at their disposal to create a lived-in world that had gone through centuries of conflict is felt in every frame, as Batman delves deeper into the corruption of this doomed city. This feels like the first steps for a brand new Gotham to rise from the ashes. Not just one that has a very different kind of villain, but one that takes the city in a bold new direction for the story, as we follow the future of Gotham filled with hope. The film ends leaving us with a message that things will get worse before they get better, as a summary of what Gotham has already been through and has yet to go through, as we journey forward into an exciting new saga with The Dark Knight.
I'm vengeance.